Welcome to another episode of the Movie Pitch, the weekend movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about another remake to come out on a Friday the 13th, and that movie is The Last House on the Left. The reason why I didn't post this up over the weekend is because I really wanted to have the time to go back and sit and rewatch the original. That way I could really give this movie the best analysis I possibly could. For those of you who don't know, this movie is pretty much about the kidnapping and brutal assault of two young women by a gang led by prison escapee Krug. The gang then unknowingly finds themselves at the summer vacation home to the parents of one of their victims, and the parents then proceed to devise an increasingly gruesome series of revenge tactics, and that's the main point of the story. I have to say the original film is really a classic drive-in grindhouse style exploitation film. So it was really strange sitting in a theater watching a movie like this, getting a modern refreshing of it with the cinema style, the graphics, and just the overall look that we are usually seeing today. But I am pleased to say that this is actually a very good film, and it stays very true to the original material. From the young women that get kidnapped being not as innocent as maybe their parents think they are, to the mindset of the killers and to somewhat of the parents. Granted, I think in the original one, the parents are more like the killers. Well, they find out something happened to the daughter and boom, they're going to go out and kill these people. In this one, they kind of like, well, let's get out of here. And when they can't, they resort to what you see in the film. Now, some people are saying that this new Krug in this film, played by Garrett Dillahunt, is how he's far more menacing and psychotic than the Krug in the original. And I personally think just the opposite. Sure, in the original one, it was played by David Hess, and he had some humor written into the script for him, and but when it comes down to it, I just thought the original character of Krug was far more cutthroat and just even more menacing of a character, because in the original, the killers themselves had some morals. Like, they felt bad for what they were doing, but they just didn't give a shit. In this one, he's just cold-hearted, doesn't feel bad for what he's doing, and to me it just doesn't come off really as menacing. To me, as a person, what's more menacing is a person that knows what they're doing is wrong, but yet they just don't give a shit. And that just works for me. Other people obviously agree that this new guy is more menacing, and it is a great character, but I just find myself liking the original Krug a lot more than what is actually in this version of the film. As far as the story goes for the movies, I do think that the story in this version is a little more polished than the original, because in the original the story jumped around a lot and it did get kind of like distracting from time to time, and they opted to keep the comic relief factor from the original, which was the sheriff and his deputy. They opted to keep that out of the remake, which in my opinion was probably for the best, because I don't think it really gelled with the dark nature that this film is really trying to be. And the other thing, I think they really skipped out on the torturing of the young women, because in the original, the torture was just raw and in your face. From Krug humiliating one of them by making them piss themselves, to him carving his name into one of their chests. There's nothing like that in this movie, and it's really not a big deal, I guess. But for a movie that's getting so much criticism and people are calling it torture porn, call me crazy to see a film that's called torture porn. I expect to see a little more torture than was actually in the movie, because there really isn't much. And I know I'm not the only one out there that feels this way, but filmmakers opted not to put much torture, which I think was the driving force to the movie in the first one, for the beginning half of the movie, and this film just really had nothing that satisfied that aspect of the original for me. I have to say I was really pleased with the majority of the death scenes in this movie, even though there was its fair share of CG used in the kills, but the kills are just so fucking over the top that I really have to let it slide because they took the kills up so many notches on this one. Um, but I did, however, find myself sitting there missing scenes which include the sadistic Sadie character, which is the lone female in the game, playing with one of the victim's intestines, and the original chainsaw fight between Krug and the father. Those two things I thought were just classic in the original, and I was hoping for some callback to that, but it's not really there. But I will say the overall deaths of the people are a lot better in this one. I guess the last thing I really have to talk about is just the overall general look of the film. The film really looks sharp. I think they did everything right. In the beginning of the movie, before all the chaos really starts, the film is shot mostly with tripod shots and Steadicam, but as the film progresses and things start getting a little more hectic, it moves more to handheld, so it's a little more shaky, and it just adds that much extra to the feeling of the movie. And with this being a modern adaptation, you really don't have to bear to look at like the old style day for night shots that were all over the original. And I think they look hokey, but there's not a whole lot that you can ask for in that film. But I really think people that are going to go see this movie are really going to be impressed with the look and feel of the film in general. Well, that's going to end this edition of the Weekend Movie Review. Overall, I have to say that Last House was one of the better remakes that I have seen. And if I was one of the original filmmakers who just happened to be producers on this version of the film, I would be very pleased with the final product of this. It brought in originality, and yet it doesn't shit on the original source material. Critics can sit around and call this movie vile and torture porn, but I think that's only going to make avid horror fans like myself run to theaters to see this movie, and I think they'll be very pleased with what they see. So I'm going to have to give this movie 3.5 out of 5, which I think is a pretty solid score for a film of this caliber. So I recommend you all go out and see this film while you can. It's a great movie. I think you'll have a great time watching it. Won't be for everyone, but it will have a following of people that will be very pleased with the product of it. Thanks for watching, and check back later in the week for more. And also keep your eyes open on the channel for a segment that I'm going to revive that I've did in the past, the Grindhouse Redux. And I have 3 movies in my mind right now that I'm going to touch on in those 3 installments coming up in the next couple weeks to a couple months. I'm going to talk about the original Last House on the Left, Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead, and Lucille Fulci's Zombie. So stay tuned and check back for more.